Great. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry we're a few minutes late. We were waiting for all of the commission members to get in. I have allotted 15 minutes for privilege of the floor. I see one hand up. It says no zoning, and all I see is a sign. And then I see John Morse. Let me see if there's anyone else, and I'll call them in.
Ellen Harrison has her hand up, and Bonnie Hargreaves has her hand up.
Okay, great. Okay, so no zoning. I don't know who your name. Could you speak?
And I am trying to unmute.
This is Holly McGee.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. For the record, it's Holly McGee. And again, I have several questions, but I'm only going to ask a couple. This method of asking minimal questions might lead to straight answers, but I highly doubt it. I will read a quick statement first and then ask my question. These past few weeks have been a little unclear to me. I am very confused as to who's supposed to be in charge here. I have done a lot of research, and everything I found says that under New York State town law and the consent of the governed is needed before the moral right to use state power is justified. Interestingly enough, the Caroline Town Board's website states the same thing. My confusion doesn't stem from the law, but more from the lack of acknowledgement we as residents have been receiving from the town board. Mark Whitmer, we have sent you emails upon emails to share our concerns in regards to the zoning draft. We've stated numerous times that we don't want it edited, we just want it gone. We have put no zoning needed notes in boxes around this town. We are trying like hell to join the Zoom meetings because this is your insisted method of communication. There are hundreds of us in a group called Caroline Residents Against Zoning. We have no zoning needed signs in our front yards. As residents, we are petitioning against this. And we have been freezing our asses off protesting outside the town hall. I don't know why I need to tell you all of this because you already know. You have seen us protesting, you drive by our yard signs, and I would hope you've read our emails, but at this point, that seems highly questionable. You, the board, the zoning commission, and whoever else that's involved in this nonsense have been continuing on about this like the residents here don't exist. You are treating us as if we are commoners or peasants who have no significant social status. This seems morally unethical and wrong, not just to me, but everyone that lives here. My question to you and the members of the board is, what more evidence do you people need to realize that the majority of Caroline residents do not want zoning? Also, with you fully knowing this, why are you still ignoring us on this topic and continuing to go about it like we don't exist? So please enlighten us with your response and the reasoning behind treating us this way and continuing on with the zoning draft at this point. We expect a full explanation.
Holly, have you finished? I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I'm finished. What's your explanation for this?
I don't answer questions at these. As you know, when you send us a question, we put things up. I think there are answers already to this question up on the website.
The reason that you're ignoring us and continuing on with the zoning draft, what is that reason?
Holly, that is not for me to answer. You've gotten my answer about that.
No, I have not. No, I have not.
Holly, wait a few minutes and you'll hear it then. John Morse, I'm calling on you.
Let's see.
I'm in?
You're in. Go
Yes.
ahead, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Hi, folks. So there's currently about 120 residents in front of the town hall that care about this town and they want to be heard. I'm speaking for them. First, I just want to say that I'm not one bit surprised that Mark, you or none of the zoning commission are at the town hall tonight and that you decided it was somehow good not to tell the community you had moved off-site. I'm not surprised because you know there are lots of residents who disagree with zoning in Caroline. We've been saying all along that you're trying to push this through without proper community involvement under the guise of a pandemic that somehow prevents you and not others from hosting meetings to discuss the subject. Tonight, you continue to prove us right, as not only will you not face the community in open, unrestricted meetings to discuss the need for zoning, now you won't even walk past those who oppose this and look them in the eye. It's time that the town board stop effing around with the future of this community at a time when you won't meet with us and finally do what is right. If you're unwilling to listen to the residents and put an end to zoning, then we insist that you put a halt to all zoning related activities, zoning commission meetings, hired work on zoning, and town board discussions until such time that the pandemic that you claim prevents us from in-person meetings is over, and we can host events that will allow the full community involvement. At
Ron,
which
we
point,
can't
we
hear you.
also require that step one be to host open in-person meetings without arbitrary restrictions such as vaccines, meetings where the town can propose the intent of zoning and explain why such a discriminatory law would even be considered in a community such as Caroline. And then allow for as much Q&A and open discussion, including back and forth discussion as needed until both the town board and residents have all had as much opportunity as needed to make their points. After that, if the town board still feels it necessary to pursue zoning, then the zoning commission could resume with continued open discussions and in-person meetings to address all details within any proposed law. The town's most recent attempt to offer in-person attendance while requiring both vax mandates, masks, and 6-foot distancing is nothing more than a joke. Similar to the zoning commission's proposed commercial zone that limits buildings to 5,000 square feet and everything else about a new business. I am fully vaxxed, but what makes you believe that my decision to vax or not vax in any way protects you? Were you not aware that a vaxxed person can carry COVID and often with less symptoms, so it may be unknown to them? Why a vax mandate for these meetings? Once again, and finally, we say that it is absolutely appalling that the board would continue work and discussions on something of this magnitude at a time when the COVID pandemic prevents you from opening the doors to open and full community discussion. We have lived without zoning for 200 plus years. What is the rush? Probably only need 2 more weeks to flatten the curve. Town of Caroline, established
Ron,
1811.
you have
No
10
zoning
more
needed.
seconds.
Zoning favors the elite.
Thank you. John, thank you for speaking tonight, and I certainly heard you say that you are very much opposed to zoning and you want answers from the town board.
I also want in-person meetings.
Yes, I heard that as well. Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. The next speaker is Ellen Hargreaves, and then, excuse me, Bonnie Hargreaves, and then Alan Harrison, and then I see Cyrus's hand up. So Bonnie? Mark?
I'm working, I can't,
There she is. No,
yeah, I'm searching for her here. There we go, okay. Thanks.
and Cyrus, I see your hand up. You can take it down because I see it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes, yeah.
can. Thank you, Bonnie.
Okay, thank you. For those of you that don't know, I'm Bonnie Crispell Hargreaves, and my family operates a farm here in Sladeville Springs. With the zoning commission focused on sections 2 and 3 tonight, could you please answer the following 2 questions on these 2 sections in your discussions? Number 1, how to apply district boundaries and overlays. If my property is in the ag rural district and half is covered by the core forest overlay and half is not, how do I apply density? Assuming the parcel is 7 acres, 4 of which is in the overlay and 3 is not in the overlay, does that mean I can build no house on the portion that is in the overlay and just 1 house that is not covered by the overlay, thus only being able to build 1 house on the 7 acres? Today, before zoning, I could build a house up to 4 to 5 houses on my 7 acres. Let me repeat that. Assuming the parcel is 7 acres, 4 acres of the overlay and 3 acres is not, does that mean I cannot build a house on the portion that's in the overlay and only 1 house on the part not covered by the overlay? Thus, only building 1 house in the whole 7 acres. This means that the new zoning law would decrease my buildable lots by over 80%, but my property taxes would remain the same. Plus, please clarify if this is an incorrect application of the new zoning law. Can you get my purse, please? Number two, if I own an unimproved parcel that is below the minimum dimensions, a parcel, for example, in a hamlet with less than 1 acre, or in an ag-rural district with less than 3 acres, or in a forest overlay with less than 5 acres. After the new zoning law is implemented, can I still build a house on my substandard lot? Let me repeat, after the new zoning law is implemented, can I still build a house on my substandard lot? Can I just do it with a building permit, or is there a new process that I need to go through? Density does not seem to work fairly with 5, 10, 15, or 20 acre parcels. I hope you can help us learn more about how these questions are addressed by the proposed zoning law. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yes, I hear your questions. We are, I know, this evening going to talk about the forest overlay and how that works. And soon I will talk again about our process before we go into those discussions. Ellen Harrison.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Hi, Ellen.
Hi. I want to say that I have a very different feeling. I really appreciate tremendously the diligence and the amount of time and patience that the commission and the town board put into this issue, these issues. I think that it's proceeding at a reasonable and deliberate pace, and I think the process has been very open. Personally, I find trying to participate through Zoom to be a benefit. More people are here than would probably be at any public meeting at town hall on a cold winter night. So I would appreciate if one doesn't have internet resources, it's much more difficult. I think the web resources that you guys are putting up are terrific. They're very approachable. I've been extremely impressed by the recent timely and thoughtful response to the questions. So I think you're doing a great job. I also appreciate the challenge of proposing a zoning law that recognizes the responsibility of being stewards of the land for future generations. The land is an irreplaceable and fragile resource, and it is a challenge to do something that will be acceptable enough for the town board, the representatives of our town population, for that town board to find it acceptable. But as far as I'm concerned, you need to err on the side of caution, because once land is screwed, it's screwed. I had a few specific comments on the current draft. I look forward to future comments on other aspects, but right now, I am gratified that I think the commission shares the belief that preserving our agricultural soils is critical. And to that end, I think that the prime farmland, the small bits that we have between Slaterville Springs and West Slaterville, should be removed from the Hamlet district and be placed in the agricultural rural district. I think the idea of clustering residential units in a conservation development strategy is a good approach. I think the requirement ought to be that the density is 5 acres over the whole. Obviously, it's not 5 acre lots. That defeats our purpose. Rather than the 3 acres as proposed, I think it should be more cautious. I think I have a concern about how to prevent on the review board, how do you prevent the incremental development? I'll do 4 lots today, and then 3 years later, another 4 lots. I think it bears thinking how you might strategize to prevent that kind of incremental division of the land. There were a few specifics. The commercial district, it seems that the commission is recommending that the future zone ought to be pretty much where it currently is commercial. And that has some understandable in some ways, but it's not universally, should not be universally applied. And I think that the commercial zone, there's a commercial district proposed on Route 79, just east and north of Thomas Road. And that commercial district currently has 2 commercial enterprises there. But I think it should be in the ag rural zone for a couple of reasons. One is it's directly across the street from the school, from the elementary school. And it just seems inconsistent to me to have commercial uses there. We're supposed to slow down, and the kids use the outdoors a tremendous amount at that school. It's wonderful. So that's one reason. The other is, in addition to those 2 commercial properties, there's a residential property at the corner. So it's at the corner of Thomas and 79 on the northeast corner. It's strictly residential. It has a significant water resource on it, and there's no reason for that to be commercial. So I would get rid of the commercial on that side of Thomas Road.
Ellen, you only have 15 seconds left.
Okay, I'll send a photo of the map that I would suggest. And there's another property on the west side, where there's a tiny little driveway area and then a big property nestled amongst residences. And I don't think that makes sense to make that commercial. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ellen. And I heard you thank us for our work. Make some comments about prime farmland, things that should be in the ag district, density over the whole. You would move it up to 5 acres. Talking about the commercial districts. Thank you for those comments.
Okay.
Cyrus, you are the next speaker. I don't see Cyrus at the moment.
He's still here, and he is unmuted. I don't. Cyrus?
Cyrus?
Hello?
Oh, is that Cyrus?
I don't think so.
Can you hear us?
No, I was actually calling on Cyrus. Is Cyrus there?
No zoning needed! No zoning needed! No
Thank you. I'm not taking that as a comment. Please close their mic.
Okay, I don't know which one that is.
It's
Crystal.
Crystal.
Oh, okay.
Um,
And yes, I see Cyrus unmuted. Cyrus, are you there?
Cyrus, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Do you need to?
Cyrus, your mic must not be working. I cannot hear you. Cyrus,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Please email me something because I can't hear you. Thank you. Can you turn off Crystal's again?
Oh. Which one is that?
Crystal?
Crystal,
Oh,
we hear you, Crystal. Okay, that is all I have, and I'm gonna move on to the rest of the meeting. Approval of the minutes. I don't know what's going on with Crystal, but we know
I
that.
worked on it. Sure.
Can you
right.
don't turn off their mic, just drop them?
Yeah, I was going to move the same thing. If they will not stay muted, then we'll have to drop them out of the meeting.
Okay, actually, before I go on to the minutes, I'll talk now just a little bit to give everyone who's on the call a sense of what our process is. This is our process. The town board got applications in for people to be on the zoning commission back in March and April, in that time frame. We began meeting in late April. The town board hired consultants for us. Nan Stolzenberg is on the call this evening. We began to meet, which meant we started reading zoning laws. We spent a lot of time trying to understand what a zoning law would mean in Caroline. We looked at other zoning laws in this county and in nearby counties and across the state. We did a lot of research. I guess I regard what we are doing essentially as research, because what we've been asked to do by the town board is this: to listen to people's comments, to actively seek them out, which I think we've done. We had public meetings. We've had 2 public meetings so far. We will have others. Those are public informational meetings. Our meetings have all been open to the public through Zoom. That's how we have met in general for this entire time. And we are allowed to do that by state law right now. So, by state regulation. What we will try to do is we asked our consultant to listen to what we had said as we went through various topics and what the comments we'd gotten from the public, and write us a draft. That draft was posted. It is just a draft. It is not final regulation by a long shot. It is a draft, and it's the first draft, and we have not finished commenting on it. Can someone shut Carissa out? If Carissa, it's my memory of the last time there was a lot of screaming. Yep.
Hey, this is what
Same
a
thing.
meeting looks
Please
like.
stop, Carissa.
You come out and have a conversation, but you don't have anything to say on the merits of what you're
Please drop Chris out.
doing, because you're trying to steal people's land. And you're
Okay, the
trying
biggest part
to
of my
crush
process is I
people's
am not
ability
going to
to
allow this
create
process
wealth
to be
generationally for their
hosted
family.
by people who cannot control
You
themselves. in public
bureaucrat
meetings.
scumbags.
Thank you so much. Okay.
We're not gonna comply. You're gonna have to come take it with force. And you know what? You defunded the police, you piece of shit.
Okay, Mark, would you please drop Carissa off the call? Thank you. I hate having to do this. I really believe in public participation, but that's not participation. That is public screaming and not allowing the process to go forward. We are doing what the town board has asked us to do, and we are going to continue to do that. We don't adopt a law. We will come up with a draft. We will bring it back to the people. The people will respond. We'll come up with a final thing. Someone is speaking and I don't know who it is. Anyway, that's our process. You'll hear more about what we're doing. What we're going to do tonight is do the same regular things, approve minutes, hear a few reports, and we're going to go on to trying to make sense of Articles 2 and 3 and what we really think should be in them. Because as I've said, please, this is just the first draft. Thank you. So I will now go on to the approval of the minutes. Would someone on the commission like to recommend them?
So recommended to approve the minutes. This is Barb.
Thank you, Barb. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Ernie. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Or nod.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Tim Murray, the town council report.
The town council has changed the days of its monthly business meeting and agenda meetings. So we're meeting for the agenda meeting on the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. And we will have the business meeting the second Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. We'd initially this year hoped to have the business meeting on the third Wednesday, but that ended up being inconvenient for a couple of our elected officials. So we're doing it on the second Wednesday. So tomorrow night will be the first town council business meeting of February at 7 o'clock. That meeting is going to be hybrid. The requirement for that meeting in order to continue to keep everyone as safe as possible is everyone needs to be vaccinated, masks, and maintain distance. I was going to give a little bit of background on the recommendations for site plan law made by the task force, but I think I'll wait on that until the commission gets to that point in its discussions down the road. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Bill, do you have a report from the planning committee?
Nothing from the planning board. Surprisingly, we've been a little busy for the last couple of weeks.
Yes, we have. And before I do get to the next point, I do want to say thank you so much particularly to Bill and Barbara, who have been the people who have written a lot of the responses to questions we have received. There are answers to 66 questions up on the website. They are grouped by topic. I think they're reasonably easy to find. They're in 2 different documents because as we get the answers written and they are then put up, I have gotten lots more and I've gotten lots of comments as well. The comments are passed along to everyone to see. The questions are answered. And that is what we're attempting to do. So I am enormously grateful for the work that everyone has put in.
Jean, could I just note, this is Barb, I'll just note that within the next week, we anticipate that answers to question numbers 66 through 149 or so will be posted. So there is more to come. And I'll also note that many of the questions are pointing out that there are misperceptions about the language of the draft zoning law. For example, misperceptions that the height of grass in a yard would be controlled, which is, there's no language at all in zoning about that, or misperceptions that whether chickens and egg laying are allowed under zoning. And again, there's no language at all, no prohibition of that at all in zoning. And I could go on with the number of misperceptions that are showing up in the questions, but for people who are interested, they could read the Q&A that is posted on the Zoning Commission website and look for more Q&A to appear in the coming weeks.
Great, thank you. I also want to thank Michelle Brown, who has been corresponding with some people about when their answers are posted. So let's go on to Committee A, which has been looking at Articles 2 and 3, and that was Michelle and Bill and Bruce. And Bill is going to do some presentation. We decided, I think, that we should probably start with maps and talking about the overlays. Is that good for you, Bill?
Yep.
Okay.
So I will share. So what I think I'll do, if this feels right, I mean, I'll share the map and then basically step through the motions that were put out related to the maps, sort of highlighting on the map what that motion is referring to. And then go on to there from discussion. But I thought I would work all the way through all the things in the map. If that seems okay way to go ahead?
That sounds great.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so hopefully everyone is seeing a map of a sort of the northwest quadrant of the town of Caroline. This is the map that has the changes on it. And I'm going to move my over a little bit. All right. Okay, so the rough changes are to make some breaks between some of the hamlets as drawn in this map and remove some land from what was a hamlet into the ag rural zone. So starting off with the first one, there's a proposal that what is now the Beesimer-Brooktondale hamlet, so this sort of olive color, and then also here, would instead perhaps have a break right here, right about Beesimer Road, heading up to Middaugh Road on the south side, so that on the north side of the road, the break would be about here. On the south side, it would be all these parcels, and all of that would become part of this darker brown Brooktondale. Rather than called Brooktondale Center, it would be called Brooktondale. And then this region out here as well would get added to Brooktondale. And as was put out in a note to the committee, that sort of difference makes the most sense if then we indeed are going to look at differences in uses between the remaining, what is now the Beesimer hamlet and the Brooktondale hamlet. And so, the various things are going to have to happen in concert here, looking at the use table along with looking at some of these map changes. But anyway, that change would be made in order to facilitate a difference in uses between a more residential, perhaps Bessemer area, and a somewhat more commercialized Brookendale area, different from a most commercialized center Brookendale area. Okay, so let's see. That is all of that. Next proposal is to take what was the Sladeville hamlet, and indeed, as referenced by one of the speakers earlier today, take the central portion, which is some prime farmland, prime, capital P, capital F, prime farmland. It is defined by both the federal government and the state government as top quality soil in Caroline for farming, and take this piece and keep it in the agricultural rural zone. The remaining portion would be the Sladeville Springs hamlet and then the West Sladeville hamlet. And again, calling these two different hamlets, it sort of makes sense sort of geopolitically in terms of how we think of the town, but it's most important if there are indeed different uses in West Sladeville versus Sladeville Springs, and that indeed might get reflected in the use table. So again, those discussions go hand in hand.
Okay.
And let's see. Then the third change would be that right in here, on the north side of the road of Route 79, there's some active farmland. And on the south side, there is a residential property that is mostly vacant, growing up in shrubland. And the proposal would be to put that back in the agricultural rural zone as well, to help facilitate sort of a pattern that we currently have of a pleasant rural, more developed, rural, somewhat developed, rural, pattern to go across the town. So it's not one huge strip of development, either residential or commercial across the town. I will point out, because it came up in the privilege of the floor today. So the parcels being talked about, this is the Caroline School right here.
Mhm.
And across the way is Hunt's Auto. That used to be Nash.
Yep.
And there's a couple commercial properties there. And that's what the speaker is talking about. And then the other issue that was brought up was there's a property here that's currently residential that is indicated as commercial here. So that's the spot that was being talked about for those who maybe couldn't follow because there wasn't a map in front of us at the time. And yeah, I think that is what I have. And there's more work on overlays. I think we'll get to that later. So the map question was making a Brookendale hamlet separate from a Bessemer Brookendale hamlet, and splitting Sladeville into West Sladeville and Sladeville Springs with corresponding changes in some of the property zones.
Okay, so I'm going to consider that this is the motion that we have on the floor to do these things, and I'd like to hear discussion from the board members, and I can't see anyone right now, so someone who
I have a
can.
question. Bruce?
Hi, Bruce. Yep. Hi, Bruce.
Hi. If this is a motion that's on the floor and we vote on this to do this, does that indeed lock in the only commercial zones that are present on this map?
No, that locks in this map for our second, probably for our second draft, unless, as we talk about commercial later on, as we're going along through this, before we get to a second draft, we add some. But it stops this conversation about this area unless somebody who has voted for it brings it up again. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on the committee have any support for this or questions about it, or don't think this is a good idea?
Ernie has a question.
I do. It's Will.
Okay. First,
I
Ernie,
can't
and then Will.
raise my hand, I don't think.
It's okay. You're going to have to talk because I can't see you. So, Ernie.
The gravel pit. You have that circled. You kind of glossed over it, or I lost my internet connection. Was there some thought about putting that into the hamlet?
No, I mean, I mentioned it last meeting, so I didn't bother mentioning this meeting. I was indicating it there because I think it's quite relevant. It's obviously a prominent feature in the town. The purpose of this motion was to not include that as separate from the agricultural rural zone. And again, it is understandable that in the future, if at some point in time the gravel pit ceases to be an industrial operation, that might become housing, but that isn't going to change in the foreseeable future. So it seemed reasonable to leave it as is.
Let me interject that I did speak with the DEC this past week and asked about what the reclamation plan for University Sand and Gravel. And I don't have a copy of it yet. I should be getting one, but essentially the person at the DEC told me that the reclamation plan is a very large pond and restoring the land, you know, replanting the land, adding trees, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, is it zoned now? And I said, no. And he said, well, in that case, I wouldn't zone it as commercial because I wouldn't, you know, that's what he said to me, because it's going to have to be, it's by DEC laws, it sort of has to be this reclaimed area. Things around it, and I don't know exactly how much of that has to be reclaimed until I get the reclamation plan. So also operate, and he said it's completely dependent on supply and demand. You know, what the price is of gravel, what the demand is for gravel, because they can go down many more feet still. Okay, so Ernie has asked that question. Ernie, so right now it would not be included in the hamlet.
Right, got it.
Okay, and Will, what's your question?
On the Brookendale hamlet, it looks like the camp on White Church Road is included. Is that correct?
I think that's right.
Do you know where I mean?
Yeah, you're basically talking right in here.
Okay, so, yes. So I'd like to understand that a little better because it seemed like we were drawing boundaries based on housing density, and that's a seasonal camp. It's not residential. So why are we including it in the hamlet?
I think Nan might be able to have some insight
Yeah.
on that. Yeah.
Nan, do you have anything to say about that?
I just think that when we were looking at long-term uses, that might be an acceptable area to extend the hamlet out for future use. I mean, there's nothing that will prevent it from staying as a campground now, but should they ever want to not be a campground, then that's an appropriate place, or what we felt was an appropriate place for more hamlet style development.
Okay. Any other comments about this or anything else in this map? Just speak. I don't hear anything. So
I should probably point out, I mean, because this was a little bit different than we talked about last time, that what was shown as hamlet commercial, the motion is to have that simply be Brookendale Hamlet, not hamlet commercial.
Okay.
And we will probably get to that discussion, but again, part of that hinges, and the wisdom of that may hinge on what the final decision of uses and sizes is in what will be this dark brown area. Yes, those existing uses are grandfathered in, so they don't have to stop functioning no matter what they're zoned. But because when we're looking at the size, it seemed to me to make some sense to go ahead and keep them part of Brookendale as opposed to hamlet commercial. But that's just my own opinion.
Okay, so I think with that, that we will take up this idea about commercial when we get to commercial again. But with that, with the rest of this map, with the partitioning essentially of Brooktondale from Bessemer, with taking, with separating Sladeville from West Sladeville, with putting in some of these agricultural lands back in. Are people happy about that? Please unmute yourself and say yes or aye.
Yes, this is Michelle. I'm happy with that.
Yes, this is Barb.
And yes, this is Bill.
Aye. Ernie, aye.
Will? Bruce?
I agree somewhat, but it also hinges on the commercial for me.
Okay. But for this, without talking about the commercial, this is okay with you?
I don't like the commercial that's already there being that small.
Okay.
But
we'll
there's
talk about
nothing we can
commercial,
do
but
about
let's
it.
take commercial out of this and just have the conversation about the outlines, the borders. And Will?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, I'm still, I can't say yes at this point, but I'm not saying no. I don't want to hold things up, but there's a couple things I'm still trying to figure out. You know, with all the email traffic, it's been kind of hard to focus on just the Hamlet mapping question. So I'm not saying yes and I'm not saying no. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm just still thinking about it.
Okay, I am counting that. So I have Michelle and Barb and Ernie as yeses. I have Will and Bruce as maybes, and
I said yes too.
and Bill said yes too, and I say yes. So at this point, we have a majority saying this is the direction we're heading in. We'll come back and talk about commercial and see where we're going. Good. So Bill, what else would you like to bring us from Article 2 and Article 2?
Okay, so I think I'll stop sharing my screen because it's easier for you and everyone to see each other, and the rest, I don't have maps ready to show of the overlays necessarily. I just didn't think to get ready for that. But the next section is the overlay section of Article 2. Ernie had submitted a motion saying that we go ahead and accept the water resources overlay, and I think I'll just ask the question on process. I'm assuming that if we that we don't necessarily need to move to accept things. What we're trying to move is things we want to change. Is that reasonable, or what should we do?
I think let's have a little conversation about the overlays in general, because I think there's a lot of questions, certainly among the public, about them. And I've heard from 2 people on the committee that they still don't quite know how to deal with them. So I'm going to turn to Nan and say, Nan, explain the overlays a little bit, and that would be great.
And in particular, because if you could address the questions that were raised in privilege of the floor on half my property is in, half is out, what can I do about a house, that sort of stuff, I think that'd be really helpful.
Yep.
Okay, so overlay districts are a technique that's used specifically to protect environmental resources. So an overlay district, you can kind of think of it as an area that's delineated on a map to cover some sort of environmental resource that sits on top of the regular zoning district. So in your case, you have hamlets in the ag rural district, and then you have specific resources that your comprehensive plan has identified as important resources to the community. And so the overlays are areas that include those important resources. So the water resources overlay includes the stream area. It includes the floodplains, the wetlands. The New York Natural Heritage Program identified riparian zone, which is a a certain distance away from the creek that they have identified to protect stream habitats and water quality. It includes the buffers around the regulated wetlands. And so the notion behind the overlay is that it gives you an opportunity through where it's drafted now is through an abbreviated review to make sure that those resources are protected. So the overlay would work in the sense that you want to the maximum extent possible to move activities that are going to have a lot of impact on those resources away from those resources. The draft zoning recognizes that there are some parcels in town that are fully within that overlay district, and so we don't want to. We want to recognize that there is that situation, and so it makes accommodation for what will happen if that's the only place of someone has, is that all of their parcel is in that. So the overlay gives us an opportunity to look at better siting. It does not, the water resources overlay doesn't change the density, it's a siting issue. So we say you have a parcel, half's in the overlay, half's out of the overlay, and however many acres you have, you go through the density calculation and you're eligible for however, let's say you were eligible for 5 houses on the parcel and there's an overlay in it. What the zoning is seeking is that those 5 dwellings are placed outside of the overlay area to the maximum extent. And so what is that protecting? That's protecting floodplain areas that flood, wetlands, some which may be regulated by DEC, some which may be regulated by the federal government. It protects those really vital habitats along the creek, which are important habitats, but also highly influential to the water quality. So the water resources overlay gives us the opportunity to ensure that what building does take place is done in a way that is aware of those environmental resources. So hopefully that explains the purpose is really oriented to the siting. The other overlay that is currently being proposed is the forest core area. And the forest core area was developed by, and this is based on work that DEC has done and various other agencies looking at where are our critical habitats from a plant and animal perspective, from a resiliency to climate change aspect. And so the forest core areas are defined. We look at where are there 100, so the forest core is considered a 100-acre block. So we look and see where are there 100 acres worth of forest land that is unbroken. And so we first find out where those 100 acres are, and then we remove from that 100 acres that 1,000 meters of space that buffers. So anytime there's a road, a lot, a farm field that's not forest, then that is automatically a boundary that we then move in from. So if you look at the map closely, you'll see that none of those forest core areas go right up to the road. They're all a distance back from any lot, any road, or any farm field, because those by definition are no longer forest. So the forest core are, for the most part now, mostly undeveloped. They're undeveloped parcels. They're the areas where you have the steepest slopes. they're not road frontage parcels. The parcel boundary may be along the road, but the forest core overlay is set back from the road. So it would not affect the development along road frontages. But it's designed like the water resources overlay. It's designed to try and limit as much as possible the fragmentation of those forest core areas to the maximum amount that we can. And so to do that is we look at, again, siting is very important, and how can we site something new in a way that minimizes the impact to those forest core areas, which may be hard to do. Once you start cutting in there, it's no longer a forest core. But to minimize the impacts to those really critical areas through siting and through a lower density of development, so that there's less development that takes place in those forest core areas.
What's that got to do with it?
Can I follow up with a very specific question, like it was posed? That say I've got 20 acres, and I know that 7 of the back acres are in the forest core area, but my front 13 aren't, and I want to put a house in those front 13. I can just do that, or do I have to go through some convoluted process and all that kind of stuff? I mean, if I know I'm out of the forest core area, my part of the property that's not in the forest core, is it like now I go get a building permit, or do I have to go through a review?
I think that, that the process that you ultimately choose for this, you can choose to have it go through an abbreviated site plan review. I believe that right now the way it's set up is that if there's a development proposal and a overlay area is on that parcel, it would move it to an abbreviated site plan review, which is specifically set up as a 1 meeting, show us what you've got, where it is, and what you plan on doing. And if they were to come, say, to the review board and say, I'm going to put my house along the road and I'm not going to put it in the forest core area, then the next step would be go get a building permit. So, it's up to the town to decide whether you want that process. If you could potentially have a process where someone just goes to the building inspector looks at the map and says, yeah, your house is going to be out of the forest core overlay, you're good to go. So, it all depends on how much you feel there needs to be a review, how much you're able to put on the shoulders of the building inspector. It comes into play in that decision. But certainly that is an option. But yes, so the short answer is that certainly if someone's property was split in an overlay, we would want those buildings to be along the road or wherever that overlay was not.
Okay. Are there any other overlays that people are wanting to talk about right now what we had talked about originally were several other overlays. Right now, these are the 2 that we're talking about having as separate documents.
Right.
Is that?
I have a motion about adding an overlay for prime farmland soils. I don't know when you want to get to that, but I have thoughts about doing that.
Why don't we talk about that too?
Okay.
Can I stay in the forest core for just a second?
Sure, Ernie, but I'll stay with you.
Nan, as you were going through that discussion there, you were somehow your interpretation of how this how the land is counted is a little bit different from what I'm reading in the document, and I just want some clarification. And that is net acreage, housing density. We're looking at, in the ag rural areas, 3 acres per lot average density. And my understanding was that the average density was based on net acreage of the lot. That is
Correct.
the lot after you've removed the areas that would be designated wetlands or in the forest core. Am I missing that? Is that, or is it just the wetlands and not the forest core?
Correct. The way that the draft is set up now is based on net acreage. So what that does is it enables the density to be created based on the actual buildable portion of the parcel.
Because that was not how your example.
Well, I didn't include that. You know, I wasn't talking about density in my discussion. I was trying to just explain how the overlays work. But the density, the way it's written now is that the buildable acreage is calculated by subtracting slopes that are greater than 25% and acreage of lands included in the water resources overlay. So that amount, so if you had 20 acres of land, and going back to Bill's example, 7 of it was in the water resources overlay, then you would subtract that 7 acres, and so that your density would be based on 13 acres of buildable land. The second section of the net acreage kind of section talks about what happens if most of the land, however, is in an overlay. So that's where there's an exception carved out for lands that are greater than 75% in the overlay. So not the forest core, but the water resources is included in the net acreage.
And as you pointed out there, you found 66 parcels that would be affected that way?
With the exception, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a couple questions.
Okay, so Will and then Bruce, and then I'm going to ask Bill a question. Will?
Okay, so are we discussing the mapping of the overlays at this point?
We're discussing what overlays we should include, not exactly what they would. I don't think that we're to the point where we're discussing whether it's 3 acres or 5 acres or what the regulations are, but having overlays that would be included. For instance, Bill is going to talk about prime farmland. That's what we're talking about. Does that make sense?
Okay. Well, I'm just looking for clarification here. I'd like to just note that at some point, maybe you want to put it under future issues. I'd like to talk about the mapping. Doesn't have to be now, doesn't have to be today. It's just that I think it's important.
Just go with those questions that you'd asked about where was the background for the maps, you know, whether USGS, et cetera. Is that what you're talking about?
Those are starting points.
Okay, I will put it in a parking lot and we'll
I'm
get
sorry.
That's what I
Okay,
call
good.
that. Yeah, it's in the parking lot. Okay. I'm going to go to Bruce and then I'm going to come back to Bill. Bruce?
Nan, you mentioned that forest overlays weren't in that, I forget what you said. You said that the ag land overlay or the watershed overlay would be, there was some kind of a recommendation.
Exception.
Yeah, an exception. But there's not an exception in the forest overlay?
No, what I was saying was that to calculate the number of allowable houses that may be placed on any given parcel, to calculate that number is based on the net acreage that would be available for building. And that net acreage is calculated by removing from the count lands that are in slopes greater than 25% and the acreage of the land on that parcel that's in the water resources overlay.
But not in the forest overlay.
But
Yeah,
not in the
and
forest.
Bruce, just a clarification, Bruce, if you're looking in the draft law, it's in what Nan is referring to is in section 3.2, kind of right below the dimensions table. So if you go down a little bit below the dimensions table, you'll find the language about the net buildable acreage.
So yeah, so in terms of the calculating the net, I did, in my recommendation, I did not include the forest core overlay as influencing the net acreage. I recommended a lower density in the forest core area overall, but it's not deducted from the acreage to figure out the number of houses someone would be eligible for.
Okay.
So are we,
Bill, go ahead, Bruce, I'm sorry.
are we to be discussing then the size of the lots, the acreage?
Not at the
this
moment.
point?
We will,
Okay.
but what
Okay.
I'm hoping to do is just say, yes, these are the overlays that we want, and then we'll get to those specifics when we get to go through Article 3.
Noted.
Bill, and then I'll come to Michelle. Bill, you and I had corresponded before about, you felt that you said something last week that may have been wrong, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that and then to talk about the prime farmland overlay.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, no, it's just, so in answering the question about what this, when we're talking about residential density, what we meant, and responding to the question about, do I have to sell 3 acres of my property? I was entirely correct in stating, and I will restate, there is no minimum lot size in the agricultural rural zone. There is no reason one could not sell 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre, and have someone build a house on that 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre. What has become clear in the intervening couple of weeks is now, to me, at least clear to me, how the density number operates in practice. And just to quickly sketch it out, if one owned 120 acres of rural land, what a 3 acre density limit means is that from now until the zoning law is changed, that 120 acre parcel out into the future could have 40 houses on it, 40 dwellings on it. And if that number were instead 1 per 5, then that comes down to whatever, 24, or something, whatever 120 divided by 5 is. I'm trying to do it quickly in my head. So sorry if I got the math wrong. I'm only a physicist.
24.
All right, I got 24. Good. So, and what I will postulate, this is what I want to hear from, is that probably most rural residents aren't actually intending to carve their 120 lot up into anywhere from 25 to 40 lots. So I think I hope that is acceptable but that's what we need to hear back on. Exactly that. Right. So anyway, the point is that the amount of dwellings ties to the original parcel, not some other measure of the area. It doesn't matter what your neighbor does. Your parcel that you own right now gets an allotment of, say, 40 houses if you had 120 acres at a 3 acre density, and you can use those up however you want over time within some reasons of the subdivision law. But anyway, I just want to make it clear that it tied to the parcel, not some other measure of density.
Good. I think that helps and answer some questions that have been asked tonight. Thank you. And I will say one other thing. Someone mentioned something about trying to build on a lot that's smaller than an acre. As of right now, we don't have any public water or sewer, which means that our county requires that you have at least an acre in order to put in a well and a septic system. And that's the minimum right now. And there may be some places where you'd have a hard time on an acre, depending on the shape of your acre, because it's really not good to have your well right next to your septic system.
It should be clear to the public that existing lots are already existing lots, and they are not going to disappear because of zoning. If there is an approved lot, you can build a house on it in any district, right?
Right. Provided you can get water and septic.
You can provide septic and water. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what Ernie said, is there in the non-conforming section, there's a clear statement that says lots that are existing that do not meet those dimension sizes are still buildable lots, provided they can get water and septic.
Good. Okay.
And can emphasize that that prohibition is not in our zoning. That's a health department requirement that you be able to get water and dispose of your waste and get fresh water for yourself. That's a health department requirement, not a Caroline requirement.
Right.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to Bill now and talk about the prime farmland overlay that you're suggesting.
Okay, so here's my idea, but I think we do need to step through each of these overlays, I think, because there's going to be some discussion about whether we want that overlay or
Yes.
not. So
I
I'm
just
just
want to get
laying.
the ball out. Yeah.
Okay. I would propose that we have an overlay that indicates the significant prime farmland in the town, because I know that here and there are little bits and snatches, and I don't want to, I think that that's not where we're at here. What my goal is, and what I've heard from many town residents, is they would like as much as possible to preserve farming as a way of life in Caroline, but also as an option for future generations. And if we destroy it now, it's not there later. Good soil is one of those kind of things that took a long time to build up. And if you muck it around and put a lot of buildings on it, you can't get it back. So I would like there to at least be some light level of review if a subdivision of a property that contains prime farmland is going on. That doesn't mean it cannot be subdivided, but as opposed to what we have now, which is if you wanted to, you could build a bunch of 5, 10, 15 acre lots or whatever, and no one would ever have a chance to take a look at that and say, maybe better if you left a bigger chunk on the best soil and put the houses over here. And the landowner might say, great, that's fine, I don't mind, because I'm still getting all the number of lots I wanted, and just reorganizing it slightly. So I'd like there to be some kind of review to at least have that question come up. And one way to trigger that is by having an overlay for the prime farmland soil. My follow-up recommendation is, I know there are other good soils in town. I'm not a farmer, I'm not expert enough. We have an agricultural committee in the town. I would love for them to consult with the town and come up with any other important farmlands that they thought were worthy of putting in this best farmland sort of overlay. So that's my proposal.
Okay, I hear that. I think what we'll do, since that's just gotten into people's heads, and maybe, Nan, do you have access to the prime farmland overlay that
Well, my concern there, Gene, is that overlay, it was not just prime farmland soils. Actually, it had every single prime farmland soil, but also active farms and some other things. And it's much broader than what I'm talking about now. So I think it would be a mistake to show that. If I'm right. And that's how I remember that overlay. Am I right?
Yeah, yes, that included prime farmlands, and it included the other second category that we often look at are the soils of statewide importance, which are not prime, but they're still highly productive farmlands. So that map included both of them.
Okay, so what I'm hearing Bill's suggestion is that we have this overlay, which would trigger a review of some sort, and that it include the prime farmland, which is an actual definition, and that it also, we ask the Caroline Ag Committee to recommend other areas of important farmland in the town. So with that as the proposal,
question for
Yes,
Bill. Question for Bill about that. Do you intend to include, when you say prime farmland if drained? Did you want that right up?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I
also.
Yeah. Okay, great question, Will. And I will say my thinking didn't go that far. And that would be a great point for discussion for the committee. That may well be important to, say we should include it too. I did not think through that.
So we will ask the Ag Committee to consider that.
Sure, and we can talk about it too. But yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I wouldn't have a clue what it means, but I'd be happy to ask.
Could you please just clarify what you want me to ask the Ag Committee?
Exactly. So So with that, let's bring this to discussion. The
I'm here,
discussion
Jen.
is that overlay. So what do people on the commission have to say about that? Ernie, I think you have your hand up.
I have my hand up. We've been talking about an ag overlay from the very beginning, and I was a little surprised when the first draft came out that instead of an agricultural overlay, we were getting a forest core overlay, which to my knowledge, we really hadn't talked about. And so I guess I'm just going to throw this back to Nan and just say, what is your thinking about that? And just, you know, is there something behind this, or are we just kind of, you know, shooting in the dark and
no, I think that the reason I didn't include the prime farmland overlay was severalfold. One is I was, you know, acutely aware of your desire to not have a lot of districts and not have, you know, I tried to come up with something as least complex as possible. The more overlays I felt, the more complex it would get. So the prime farmland components were really actually kind of baked into the ag rural district, is just a part of what we look at when we develop those lands. So I felt like I had integrated it into the kind of the system. And, you know, I just want to point out that if you just do a word search in the document, that prime farmland comes up in 17 different locations in the document. So I don't feel I ignored it. I just treated it as a part, is kind of like the normal part of what you would review in a major subdivision or any other kind of review, where the prime farmland soils in the conservation subdivision section, it comes up as one of the components of the primary conservation area. And so I guess in the interest of kind of making it all inclusive, I tried to incorporate protection of those prime farmlands just as a matter of course in the ag rural district.
So let me throw out a suggestion. In that, I think that, you know, in our discussions anyway, I think that we're generally in agreement that preserving farmland is, you know, very much a part of the comprehensive plan, that we look at, you know, what happens if we propose a agricultural farmland overlay and then include concern about the forest core as kind of the secondary concern that gets brought up in overview or you know, review board activities. Just, you know, to kind of put the emphasis. I mean, you know, you know, there's definite regulation of an overlay that's very well defined, or, you know, at least to the point of, you know, being able to identify what it is very clearly and regulate it accordingly, as opposed to leaving it to a review board to kind of say, oh yeah, where are the prime farmlands, and check the box and move on. I'm just tossing that out as an alternative way of looking at the overlays that are in front of us.
Okay. Barb, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So 3 points. First, I'd like to speak in favor of seeing another map that would indicate the prime farmland as an overlay, and then in a different color or different hash marks, the prime farmland if drained. So, you know, kind of one map with prime and prime if drained overlay, but designated differently so that we can see which is which on the overlay. I'm not saying that I advocate that. I would just like to, that I advocate the idea. I just want to see a map that can inform our discussions about it. So that's the first point. Second point is I'd like to speak in favor of the water resources overlay. I think that's well thought out. I think it's very important ecologically and for public health reasons that we have a water resources overlay. So I really strongly encourage that we keep that. But my third point is that I'd like to speak against the forest overlay, that I don't believe that there is a strong ecological argument for it, given the amount of forest land already permanently conserved in the town of Caroline. To truly have an meaningful ecological impact in terms of forest core, you'd really have to have, tens, if not, 50 or 100 acres of undisturbed forest. And I don't think that that's appropriate to impose on private land. So I would suggest removing the forest core. Truthfully, ecologically, the town of Caroline would be, ecologically better served by having more shrubland and grassland kind of habitats, in terms of, the kind of ecological benefit. So I am in favor of removing the forest core map, the forest core overlay, and all of the language associated with forest core within the document.
Okay. Does anyone else on the commission? I see Bruce's hand up.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Barb on that one about removing the forest core overlay, and also of at least looking at an overlay or a map that's got the prime agricultural land on it and the difference between the drained also, just because then we can look at it, tell how much it is, what it involves, where it's near roads. I mean, because right now I have no idea. I have a little idea of how much there is, but where it is and how small pieces it is in and all that, you can't tell unless we see a map.
Okay. So, and Ernie, I know this was your original thought, was to remove the forest core overlay also from the zoning regulations, correct?
Yes, I
Okay. Yeah.
would vote for
That way. So I'm going to call on Bill, and then I'm going to call on Michelle.
Okay, thanks. So my thinking aligns with Barb's. I consulted Barb because she happens to be in natural resources, but I also consulted several other faculty or postdoc-y or whatever you want to call them, people that study wildlife biology and stuff. And the opinion was fairly uniform that, laudable as it is to protect mature forest in Caroline, it's probably not the right goal. And for me, it fell short of the standard I'm setting, which is that there has to be a really enough public benefit to Caroline and to the residents of Caroline to justify what is, of course, definitely some infringement on personal choice. And so at any rate, as Barb said, we have fortunately a fair amount of mature forest protected by the state. And the other comments some of them made is, how much impact a particular house, for example, has on the forest depends a lot on the particular practices of that person. So whether it should be 1 per 3, 1 per 5, 1 per 10, they had a really hard time coming up with any kind of number. So I I think we can remove that forest core overlay. And to the question of the prime farm, again, I'm sort of calling it, I don't know, best farmland in Caroline overlay would be how I want to characterize it. But if you show a map that has all the prime farmland and prime farmland drained, great. But
Can
again,
I have that map if you want me to share that screen.
Okay, but my point is that for the overlay, what I would want is it to be the significant patches of that, significant to be defined by Nan and Rick and refined by us. Not every little wisp, but that would be that. And then Tim, the clarification to the Ag Committee is, and it doesn't have to necessarily be for this iteration, but it would be nice if it were, but maybe at some point, either not this year, but maybe 5 years from now, if we actually pass zoning. I don't know when they should do it, but I would like it eventually there to be input from those who know agriculture in this town of additional important farmland that would deserve some sort of protection in the form of a review if it's going to be subdivided, similar to prime soils. So that's the charge is, what would be additional good farmlands? And if that's not possible to do this summer, that's fine. If Caroline winds up passing zoning, maybe that can get incorporated sometime in the future.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is I'm going to go to Michelle. Then I think we'll talk about the water overlay and see if we can get everyone to say yes. And then we'll go to Nan's map. Michelle.
I guess I just want to say I agree with Barb and Bruce and Bill, I guess, and Ernie, to focus on the water resources overlay, not do the forest core overlay. And I'm curious to see how the prime farmland overlay will look. And I'd like to explore that further. And I guess every time we talk about prime farmland, if drained, we are talking about things that are defined by the state, correct? It's not like our opinion, we think these are great. These are standards that are, I'm kind of saying this for people who might be listening. These are standards set out by the state, not something we're making up as we go along. So, so I agree with the direction we seem to be going in.
Good. Hearing that, let's see, do I have universal agreement that we retain the water resources overlay? Say yes, put your thumb up.
Yes.
Something.
Yes.
Aye, look at that.
I have a question.
Oh, Bruce has a question.
Yes.
On the water source overlay, I mean, just because I personally know some of these small tributaries, when there's a section of land, like what designates the start of that, say, secondary tributary? I mean, because these have little circles in the middle of a plot. And if you happen to look at the whole map with the first overlay on it, say right under 113, the way that starts, there's a little circle, that's a pond in a field. There's another little circle, that's a pond in the field. Well, from those, where the water starts there is many fingers like that go down the ridge there, like 3 different ways that feed that one tributary that aren't on this map.
Okay,
so I'm just kind of wondering how far they, like, where they go. Do they obviously don't go all the way to the start.
So I think that I read Nan say something like, none of these maps are at a scale where you could actually read some things that we need to have. These would have to be at a larger scale. Is that what I saw you say today, Nan?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. I think that the maps, so the overlay, anytime you have a natural resource feature in zoning, whether it's a wetland, a floodplain, a stream, they're all field checked. They're not something that these maps are. I think what you're getting at, the maps aren't absolute. They're based on map data and digital data that we have. But when you have a wetland on your property, you still have to go out and have it delineated to ensure exactly where those boundaries are. So is that what you were asking about?
That was what I was trying to say in a very bad way, yes.
So the map, it doesn't include every single little tiny little tributary. I believe that it included Class C and Class C, certain class. So DEC classifies all water bodies in New York State, and they classify streams A, B, C, D, and then there's subcategories like CT, which stands for trout, or CTS, which is for trout spawning. So every little drainage ditch is not included in this map. So this, I believe, and I could check with Rick, but I believe that he did Class C, mapped Class C streams and higher.
Okay, so essentially, go ahead, Ernie.
I would just say, nor do we want to regulate every single little ditch and
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
this,
I mean,
this reflects
Right.
the streams that are regulated by DEC. So if you wanted to do something along a stream bank now, you would need a DEC stream permit
So it's,
for it.
right, so this map essentially would be at where the state is at already.
Okay. One more question.
Well, it does,
But
the
it's
overlay
not-
includes more than just, you know, it includes wetlands, it includes floodplains, it includes the riparian
Right.
boundary that
is-
has been identified. So it's not just the stream regulations, it does include other environmental features.
Yes, I got that. Bruce?
Yeah, I know you said, Nan, something about 100-foot buffer, and I was told by the DEC that it was a 50-foot buffer on a
No,
protected
DEC,
area.
DEC regulated wetlands have, their DEC regulated wetlands are 12.4 acres and larger, and they have a 100-foot buffer.
So how about a tributary? That's considered a wetland? Because I was told from the tributary, because especially just given the topography we got around here, it's real steep, you know, creek in the bottom is a tributary. I was told it was 50 feet both sides of that tributary, from the center of the creek, 50 feet both ways, not 100. So I'm just
Well, those
asking,
are
is that
two-
true or is that?
So wetlands have an absolute boundary. It's 100-foot around every wetland, every DEC regulated wetland. DEC will, so the regulations for stream bank disturbances are not set. It depends on the slope of the land. It depends on, you know, the conditions of that stream. So there's not like a set boundary around every stream that says DEC is going to regulate here. It depends on the conditions of that stream. So the section that I sent in the email today is what DEC says for its stream bank requirements. So you can't say everywhere there's a 50-foot buffer. And actually DEC doesn't buffer it. I mean, you have to get a stream permit for disturbance in a stream bank, but they're not like absolute prohibitions of development in there. So, and I'm not quite sure what, you know, who you talk to, but that's my understanding of the program.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think maybe Barry Goodrich could fill us in a little bit about some of that too. Would help immensely. Maybe we had him speak about that some.
Let me see if we can do this. Can we agree that we want to have a water overlay in the zoning regulations, and that we will look at what exactly the overlay is later, and that this will show, this would be an overlay that if you had 120 acres and 20 acres were in this water overlay, you'd be left with 100 acres. That's how that would work, right? To develop on. Bill.
Oh, I think, so Will had something she wanted to say earlier, so I don't want to get in front of her if she still wants to speak. So, and if not, then I'll
I'm
ask
sorry,
Wes
I
and
see
ask.
Will's hand up. Will?
Well,
Sure, Will,
she
you have
spoke up. So.
Okay.
I'm willing to go along with what Jean just said and wait for clarification at another time. But I won't forget my questions.
Okay, Bill?
Okay, and it was just a real quick clarification because I know that wetlands are, you know, definitely defined, and there is like certain plants, et cetera, that are there, and that's why you go out and do a field check. Streams, I think, are streams, and so I think they're two different things, but maybe I have that wrong, and that may be some of the source of the 50-foot versus 100-foot. But so Nan or someone like Barb can probably correct me on how the right terminology.
We will ask someone to define this all for us so that we will understand. Okay, so, but what I'm hearing is a general agreement that we are going to have a water overlay as part of our zoning regulations. Yes, good. Okay, and we are not going to have a forest core overlay. Right.
Correct.
Excellent. Okay. I feel like we're actually doing something. It's fabulous. Let's go on to prime farmland. So we have a map. Let's look at the map.
Hold on.
That's absolutely, because the chance of my finding it are slim to none.
Yeah, so this is not one, oh, can Mark, can you let me share my screen?
I can't find you, Nan. Oh, here you are. I got you. Okay.
Okay,
Great.
Okay.
okay.
Should be happening.
All right, yep, got it. So this map comes from your comprehensive plan, so it's a little blurry because it's basically a picture from your comprehensive plan.
Yep.
So you can see the green, so the blue area are streams and ponds. The green area here are the prime farmland soils, and the pink areas where there's just a couple patches of it are the prime if drained. You can see, you know, the prime farmland soils are mostly in the Route 79 corridor in the valley.
So and in Brooktondale and in Speedsville, and some places down along Old 76 Road.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
And,
there's a reason
yeah.
why your hamlets are where they are. You know, because farming communities developed where the best farmland was, and
Right.
you know, so we often see our developed areas are in where there's water, there's aquifers, there's prime farmlands. A lot of significant environmental resources coincide with where our developed areas are. So that's just traditionally where our communities grew up.
Yep. Okay.
And to,
So we
to
are gonna-
clarify, I was not proposing that all the land under the houses in Brooktondale be included in the important farmland overlay. This would be prime farmland that was available for farming.
Okay, yes, that sounds great.
You know, and I
Nice.
think I just want to interject when you talk to the Ag Committee about other lands that are, or other soils that are potentially farmable, clearly there are other farming areas in town that are being farmed and being farmed successfully that are not prime farmland soils.
Right.
So that was another reason why I kind of tried to integrate the prime farmlands into the ag district. You know, because there clearly are other areas that are being farmed that wouldn't meet that criteria and wouldn't have those kinds of protections then.
Okay.
So the pinkish is the well-drained farmland? Is that what
No,
that
that's prime if drained.
is? If drained, okay.
Yep.
So like right now, over between Ellis Hollow and Thomas Road, that's wetland, essentially, is
Yep.
what it is.
Right.
Yeah. And
Not much of that then, really.
Okay, but I think Nan's point about the Agriculture Committee could come up with some other areas that are very important. So,
Okay, so
go ahead.
I was just going to ask the question of, okay, so if we have a map that identifies these things, then the next step is, how are they going to be regulated? Is this simply going to require further review? Or are we going to say no development on these lands? Are we going to have something like the Forest Core overlay where we're going to have greater acreage requirements per lot, per building? You know,
Right.
how does that get structured, or how might it be structured? And do we
You're
get to have-
exactly correct. What would it mean? So, Bill, do you have any suggestions since you were bringing this to us?
You know, and there, I think that is to be determined for sure, but really all I was thinking about is a fairly light level of review, not a prohibition, but essentially an encouragement and dialogue to start that, hey, let's see if we can configure what the landlord wants to do in a way that leaves the biggest chunk of land available for future farming. So perhaps in some ways similar to the language that might have been there for the Forest Core, which I'd have to look back at that. I'm not wedded to that. I'm open to suggestions, but my concern was, given all, again, the concerns that have been raised about farming in Caroline, et cetera, that we have, people in town may not believe this, but we have a relatively large, high threshold for triggering review for many kinds of subdivisions. If you subdivide 10-acre lots, you can do 20 of them and there's no review, as I read, as long as you don't need a road, as I read the town subdivision law. And so—
5 of them.
No. If they're over 5 acres, I think you can do any number of them if it doesn't require a road.
Sure.
So given that, and given that we've seen a lot of 5, 10, 15 acre subdivisions in town, if you look at the map, that was too big a loophole, that there'd be a lot of lands that would likely in the near future get built upon. And I just wanted there to be some way to talk to the landlord saying, look, we respect what you were trying to do here, but let's see if we can, try to save this best part of this. So I'm thinking more of like an abbreviated site plan review. But again, I am open to suggestions, and hey, that might be another good thing for the Ag Committee to weigh in on.
Okay, I think that seems very reasonable. So what I'm just going to kind of sum a few things up here. So what we've decided this tonight is we've decided about the borders of the hamlets that we were discussing tonight, which is Slaterville, West Slaterville, Brooktondale, and Beesmer. We have not decided about commercial zones within them. We've just been talking about the borders. We have decided to have a water overlay and not to have a forest core overlay. And we are, I think, leaning towards having a prime farmland overlay if we can figure out what we want to say about it. We're going to ask the Ag Committee for some recommendations, and we're going to try to figure out how we can put this in. That's where I think we have gotten to. We also have a parking lot with some future issues about mapping, and that Will has brought up. And is there anything else that I am forgetting?
Just to clarify again, my proposal is, because I think it may not be possible for the Ag Committee to provide advice this year. I do not know. If so, great. But if they can provide recommendations within the timeline of when the final draft is presented to the public at our public hearing, then it goes in. But if they can't, then we just go with something related to prime farmland as defined by the state and the federal government.
Okay, so we will go to the Ag Committee and have them bring us back something if they can in a reasonable amount of time.
Can I just ask a question to Bill, that if the soils of statewide importance are, and we'd have to look at the map, but if they coincide with where some of the other active farmland is in town, is that something that should be considered?
Yeah, the problem I have with that is that when you look at the map of farms of land of statewide importance, it's a lot of the town, which is great, right? It's great, but what I don't know, again, because I'm not out there in the field, literally in the field, is whether this active farmland that is farmland of statewide importance is being farmed because it is the best land left available, or because that happens to be a particularly stubborn person who's eking it out and they just didn't want to give up, or happen to have another source of income, so even though it wasn't profitable, they could keep farming it. And those don't seem like good enough reasons to add it to an overlay zone to me. So I need someone who knows the land to make a recommendation. That's how I would be comfortable. So there, I've said my jump off the soapbox.
We're going to actually have a stubborn people overlay is what we're going to have too.
Yeah, I think the types of soil will regulate a lot of that.
Okay. Okay, I feel really good about what we've gotten done so far this evening. What I see in our future is where we go actually into.
Tim is trying to say something.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted just a little bit further clarification. If you want me to ask the Ag Committee to to advise on additional soils, do you want me to ask the Ag Committee to advise on a prime soil district per se, or overlay per se, or not?
And I guess, you know, here I am talking off the top of my head. My vision, which could be totally overridden by everybody else, that's totally fine, wasn't that, first of all, the Ag Committee was advising on soils. Soils we know. What I want them to advise on is farms.
Okay.
Okay, so because there may be a good reason, like I say, that is what's still being farmed. That's what they'll be able to find out, and that. So that's what I would say. And additional lands to include in an important farmland overlay, in addition to what Nan and Rick will identify from the mapping of prime farmland soil.
Got it.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's great. I want to just take a few minutes before we close to talk about what's coming up. So I think what we will try to do at the next meeting is to go over into Article 2 and Article 3 with some very specific questions and see if we can move through that, you know, page by page. And Nan, is there anything else that we should be looking at right now?
No, I think keep going the way you've been going.
Okay, good to know. I want to talk a little bit tonight about public meetings. So we have talked about waiting until we have a complete second draft to bring to people, and then having some public meeting or two possibly on that, or trying to break this out where we talk about Article 2 and 3. We talk about Article 5, 6, 7, 8. What do people think? What would make sense?
This is Barb. I'd like to speak in favor of having a public information meeting that would include at least Articles 2 and 3. And I think it's very important to have a discussion with public members, particularly about Article 3, which focuses on the uses. And I say that for two reasons. One, in zoning commission discussions and review of the current document, it's pretty clear to me that the use table is going to be revised, based on the comments that are going. And so once it is revised based on zoning commission discussion, I think it would be very, very helpful to have that discussion with a new set of maps and a new revised Section 3, particularly the use tables and the dimension tables, because in reviewing the 150 or so questions that have come in and that we're working on answers to, that's where a lot of the misperceptions seem to be articulated in thinking that certain, or making the assumption that certain uses are going to be prohibited in hamlets or in ag rural or wherever it is, which is simply not true. Even in the current draft. But my sense is that given the zoning commission discussions that have been going on, that even the current use tables in the 1228-21 draft are not as inclusive and not inclusive of as many permitted uses as the commission is likely to recommend in the next draft. So that's where I would really like to see us head. And I think having that discussion of both maps and the use table and dimensions table would get to a level of specificity which would really help public members be able to articulate their concerns, clear up some of the misperceptions at least that are there, and help identify for the zoning commission further specific issues that we should be considering or reconsidering in future meetings and discussions after the public information sessions.
Thank you. Bill.
So I'm going to pretty much second what Barb said, with the addition that she actually had made some weeks ago, that of course we need to grab any definitions for terms used in the use table and the dimensions table and the overlay section, just so that people know what we're talking about.
Yep.
And in particular, I want that out soon because frankly, I really would like to hear from residents of the town. Particularly, again, we're sitting here musing on how commercial some of these, because we're getting a lot of pushback and pressure because saying, I want to be able to make a business here. Well,
Right.
I understand that, but there may be residents who don't want a business going in next. And the whole point of zoning is to help separate incompatible uses. And unless we start hearing from residents of those areas, we aren't going to know whether this is an incompatible use or not. So we're making our best guess, but I'm talking to all the public out there. Please come to this information session. Please send us your thoughts now, send us your thoughts after that, because we really need to get that to help ground us in what really the community does desire.
Good. So I think, does anyone else want to speak to this? Will?
Yeah, I agree with what's being said. I think it would be good to highlight the clarifications that were made tonight, though, because someone going out to what the site we have now, it might be too much to ask them to try to find what we just discussed, and is pretty significant. I think we've made a lot of clarifications. I know you can capture them in the minutes, but if that's how we're going to do it, I think it really should include a lot of detail about, especially about the dividing up your land for residences. And it should be in very plain language. And if you need someone to do that, so it's not all on you, Jean, because you do the minutes, I could take a shot at it. I can just re-listen to parts of the meeting.
I would love that. If you want to send me a brief couple of paragraphs about that particular topic, I would include that in minutes, and we can post that alongside the questions and answers as well. I have a couple of things I wanted to also ask about. One of the things that we said is that we would not have a public meeting until we had the draft that we were going to recommend, like the second draft up for at least 2 weeks, which I think would then give people a reasonable amount of time to read it before they came to the next meeting. And I think that's where we sort of still are. So I think that we're probably looking at something like the end of March, in all likelihood. And I think we need to figure out how we can do this and get through a public meeting without having a real mess. You know, we need to be able to have a way to proceed so that people there get their questions asked and answered. Bruce?
Yeah, I agreed with what Barb said, but I kind of understood that what Barb was saying is that we had a public hearing or meeting to go over sections 2 and 3 and some of the maps before we went any farther. So that's what you just said. We were going to go down the road and not do it till we had the draft done, another one.
No, I mean of article, whatever we were going to discuss at the public meeting, not the entire second draft. Sorry, I mustn't have made myself clear. So if we're going to have whatever we're going to discuss up for, at least 2 weeks, because we had said we would do that. Right. I wanted to also ask those of you who have been writing answers to questions, is there anything, I mean, I've been reading the answers, but is there anything as we go into Article 2 and 3 that you specifically want us to think about particularly. I think I will ask that people go back and read the answers that have been put up and the questions that have been asked before we have that discussion at our next meeting.
Yeah, so just a comment about the questions and answers that are posted. They are grouped into topic areas. So you might not need to spend that much time on, for example, decision-making process questions and answers, but focus more in on, you know, the category for hamlets or the category for commercial, because those questions relate more to the uses. And the other thing I would just encourage, which I think we are all doing, is to look at the master document and all the comments that that the zoning commission members are inserting in the master document, because it seems like there's more comments every day.
Yeah, I have to get in and do a whole bunch myself, but I have written them next to the document. With people's permission, I'm going to call on Cyrus because he wanted to speak during public comment, and we had a technological issue. So Cyrus, I will give you 3 minutes to speak.
I don't need 3 minutes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to check that I have fixed the problem with my microphone. So that's it. Thank you.
Congratulations, Cyrus.
And thanks for all the great work you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. And well, the next time I have a technological problem, I'll call you, okay?
What's your number?
I've just proved that I'm the wrong person to call.
Tim Murray.
Yeah, before you end the meeting, on behalf of the board, I just want to express deepest thanks to the Zoning Commission for all of the work that you've been doing, especially over the past month. This isn't in the public view, but as liaison to the Zoning Commission, I'm deeply aware of the massive amounts of correspondence that have gone on between you, and also the incredible detail that Bill and Barb have put into answering questions from the public. So I just want you to know that your efforts are being acknowledged, and we really appreciate it. And we know what a heavy lift this is.
Thank you so much. We'll be sending. We're I think expecting cookies at any moment. So. So before we close tonight, Nan, is there anything you'd like to tell us that we should really be thinking about as we go for the next couple of weeks?
No, I think at this time, I think you need to really concentrate on the uses and the rest of the Article 2. 2 and 3 are key, and once you have those, everything else will flow from that. So I think that's really continue where you're going and make some decisions on those, and the rest will come.
Can I just make a suggestion? And this is building on towards what we need for the public information meeting, is that we've talked about making sure the terminology includes all of the uses in the use table. So if perhaps Nan could be working on that, because right now all the uses are not in the terminology section. At least get something drafted, so so then it will be available for review. So make sure all the uses are defined well.
Okay, great. And I'm going to try to read all the definitions again and see if there's anything else that comes up that strikes me that we should add. Will.
Could we have a day of the week where there's no activity, email-wise?
I love that idea.
I know it sounds silly, but it's
overwhelming. Yeah.
Just pick a day. Yeah, pick a day. I don't care which day, but I'd like a day off.
I love this idea.
Maybe I would even clean my house. I don't know.
No, I think you should come clean my house. I myself, I have finished 2 grants by February 15th, 2 grant applications. So I am like up to here. After that, so don't count on me reading anything between now and February 15th, but I will try. And I opt for Sunday. Because it's the Super Bowl, for God's sake, which is an
Oh,
American
who cares about the Super Bowl?
tradition. Well, I don't actually, but you know,
Wait. When's our next meeting? Our next meeting is the 25th, isn't it?
the next meeting is 14 plus 8 would be 22.
Okay, all right, but not the 15th. Why did you say
No.
the 15th?
No. I said,
Okay.
do we want to try to stuff another meeting in? And from my point of view, I think what we all need to do is read and get our comments up. And that will
Right.
really help. Okay, so let's do that. And I'll see you on the 22nd. Yes,
Gina, is that meeting going to be hybrid?
at this, I'm not going anywhere. And I'll tell for the people who are on here, it's because I don't feel safe. That's why.
Though, as we said, that I think doesn't preclude a hybrid meeting as long as there's someone who is willing to be at the town hall to open the
Yes.
hall up and be in attendance. I would be the last thing to say. I don't think anyone who feels that health-wise it isn't the right choice for them should go. But if there's someone who
Right.
thinks that they can, then that would allow that.
I think Mark is going to be there and opening the meetings. If other people want to be there, that's fine. I don't feel safe right now, so I'm not going. So-
I have to say, I don't feel safe, and I'm a little concerned if people from the public are going to come and yell at us and not let us do work. I just don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's important that the zoning commission not be kowtowed out of doing work because of public
Right.
animosity. And I'm confident that if we go hybrid, we can come up with reasonable means of operating. So I'd really encourage you not to make decisions based on that response in contrast to the health response, which we all know is important, but it would be quite anti-democratic were we to feel that we couldn't have meetings because of disruption, the potential of disruption. So I would encourage for those of you who have always felt comfortable doing hybrid meetings to continue doing so.
Thank you.
Personally.
I agree. Mark, you're having a town board meeting tomorrow night that will be hybrid. We'll be looking forward to seeing how that goes. I personally won't be watching because I'll be writing a grant application. Bruce?
I feel the same way, being in the predicament as everyone else. I tried to avoid large crowds, public, etc. And judging from the emails, there's a large constituent of the zoning commission who doesn't want to meet in public. And I'm just wondering, I think the more public we had, the rhetoric and the stuff is going to calm down and people will ask good questions and we'll get some direction as to maybe something we didn't even think of that we should have been thinking of.
I agree. I like that.
And those type things. And the only way that's going to happen is if we have, I think the perception of the public looking at us and saying, well, the zoning commission is not even going to be at the meeting. It's just not going to work out real well. So I'm almost thinking, hopefully in the nearest future, we can have meetings, but I'm not sure how it's going to go over with the public when we can't have meetings.
I know.
It's just not plowing forward. That's one of their main complaints. And I just don't know how we're going to rectify that. I don't know, whether we should slow down some or go over the sections that we have. I mean, if we have a public hearing, like in a couple of weeks on sections 2 and 3, I think that's going to calm things down considerably because they'll be able to ask more questions, be a little more knowledge about what's going on, and then go from there.
I hope so. Michelle?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
So Bruce, I hear you and sympathize and mostly agree, particularly about the public information meeting. I mean, I think that I hear though people in town saying, even though they could walk in and talk to Mark, even though they could send a letter, even though they could, even if they have poor internet, eventually send an email, want to have an in-person option for providing comment directly to us. And so I think, fine. And so they can come to the town hall and do that. We'll hear them. We won't necessarily be there because even if they feel it's safe, we don't necessarily, and we have a right to feel that way too, just like they have the right to feel that it's safe. So that I hope will take some of the steam off as well. But I think that we can do that, as Tim said, find a way to do it safely. I mean, frankly, I urge people who are opposed to zoning in town to keep voicing that opinion, but I urge them to do it civilly. And if they can't do it civilly, then I think that law enforcement will make sure that we can conduct the meeting. If it comes down to that, I hope it doesn't. But yes, we should conduct our business. They have a right to voice their opinions. I encourage them to participate in our process, not just say no zoning, but tell us what they don't like about it. But that's up to them when they choose to do that. But that would be really helpful, because otherwise they're passing up on an opportunity to affect this process because they're so hung up on, we may not have zoning in the town, right? Eventually there'll be a voting by the town board. But if they wait until that time to tell us what they think about what our plan details, it's too late because we've already, it's done, right? So I wish they would participate in our process now, as I guess. I really hope they would.
Okay.
But anyway, that's all I have to say.
Well, I want to say
Can
something.
I go one step further? Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Well, I guess
Michelle, and
then what concerns me, and I don't know how to solve this problem, but I think just participating in our meetings in the way that they're structured, where you have 3 minutes privilege of the floor, where it's not an open dialogue, is not satisfying. I don't think it's enough for people, and I don't know how to correct that, because the point of these meetings is for us to get something done. So the time you can have a dialogue would be at a public information meeting. And so we can't really have the public information meeting until we have something to present. I'm just saying here, we're in kind of a conundrum, and I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer to that. But I think just having a hybrid meeting is not going to take steam off if people are just going to chant no zoning, because we're not going to respond to that. We can't change that because we're going to do this plan. And yet we can't have a information meeting until we get something done. So yeah, so if anybody has an idea, that would be great.
I'm gonna talk with people about ways to, I know Nan has been through this before, and I'm sure have figured out ways to have meetings, and there are lots of people that I know who often conduct meetings in difficult situations. Bruce, go ahead.
Oh, I kind of lost my train of thought, but one thing, I know there was some discussion started talking about looking at, I think, state law, some about ethics. And I would just ask Tim if he would ask the town lawyer how he feels it would be, or what the perception would be, or be it right or be it wrong, that we have meetings and we have people in person, but we don't have any of the zoning commission, the full zoning commission present. If he would just bounce that off the town lawyer and ask him how he feels, or if he can give us what his perception of that would be, whether it good, be it bad, and give us some direction even.
Yeah, I can do that, Bruce, but we have asked him previously how zoning commission meetings should conform to state open meeting law. And the meetings now do conform to state open meeting law, whether they are completely virtual or hybrid, as Albany has now set the terms for state open meeting law. So I could go back and ask him again, but if it's okay, I'd rather not.
Well, I just have kind of I just have a weird feeling of having a meeting that's, once again, with just no board members and the public present. That gives the perception to the public that isn't real good.
Yeah.
That we're not,
that's a perception issue that we can all discuss, and we should discuss and continue. I mean, I want to just say to all of you that there have been many times in the course of recent town history where there have been hot button item issues. And the town board has been able to function really, really well in the context of dispute and hearing strong differences of opinion. But generally speaking, the members of this community, once they've been able to have their privilege of the floor, have been extremely respectful of the need to get this business done. So I'm very confident about that. And I think that the town board in its own meetings does continue to say that we're making as many options available for public access and participation as that we possibly can under this COVID environment. And we recognize that there are different opinions about COVID safety in the public, but Albany has given the town board members and town committee members the right to exercise their own personal safety through Zoom meetings at this time, if they so choose.
Thank you. I am going to declare this adjourned unless anyone has anything else to say. No? Good. We're going to have emails except on Super Bowl Sunday. Because it is, I think it's like, it's where we all worship now, as you know.
So is it soccer they play on Super Bowl Sunday, or is that baseball?
It's cricket. It's cricket, Bill.
Hockey,
Okay.
hockey, man, hockey.
Curling.
But
Oh,
the final
okay.
skate, pre-skate is first, and then they get to the finals later.
Right.
And it's
Thank
not
you,
even
guys.
shirts and skins. There you are. Okay. Night, everyone. Thank you.
Right.